Loud enough.
Yeah, that's true. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'd like to start the meeting off with a roll call.
Alderperson Robinson.
Present.
Hurt. Gilbert.
Present.
Swanson. Here. Parker.
Here.
Poulos.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
And Mayor Tomes.
Here. Thank you. Public comment. Nobody signed up, so that means that, I'm looking at the audience.
It's all
So we'll jump right in, first presentation. Mike Bartels.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for allowing Public Works to present tonight on the street maintenance funding discussion. As you all know, one of the overwhelming majority requests that Public Works receive is the condition of our streets and how we can improve them. I'm assuming that's probably the #1 request that you all receive as well. It's been on many City Council goals in prior goal settings for street improvements. So unfortunately, the standard answer that we have to give to many residents is we do not have the funding needed to make the repairs at this time. Sure, we'll go out and we'll make some repairs, whether that be a pothole patch or a pavement patch repair, but we're just basically kicking a can down the street here, literally. It's getting increasingly difficult to fund these street maintenance repairs, and our capital improvement plan with the current funding levels, which is why we are here tonight. You may recall back in 2019, I gave a presentation to the City Council which covered some of these same concerns that I'm sharing here tonight regarding funding levels and the need for additional funding to properly maintain our city street infrastructure. Unfortunately, that situation we're facing is not improved over the past 4 years. So all of us here tonight know that conversations discussing additional funding needs are not popular, but we want to be transparent with the issues that we are facing currently. So I'm going to turn it over to Luke Van Landingen, the Municipal Services Superintendent, and he'll be presenting tonight. We plan to go through these slides pretty quickly to save time for questions and discussion at the end. So I'll turn it over to Luke.
All right, good evening, everyone. Like Mike said, we're going to talk about applying funding to better maintaining our streets. It's kind of nice being up here to talk about something other than trash for once. So we'll just go ahead and dive right in here. So I'm going to try and, there's a lot of ground to cover here, so I'm going to try and move quickly. If anyone, feel free to interrupt anytime if you'd like me to kind of slow down and go into the weeds on something a little bit more, but we'll just jump right in here. So kind of as Mike said, Rock Island is facing significant challenges in maintaining its streets. There's a lot of times, one of the things we can do immediately is pothole patching. There's some various maintenance techniques that we can utilize annually to try and improve the condition of a street. However, most streets take a little bit more aggressive maintenance, which in short is pretty expensive. So one of the big challenges when trying to maintain street infrastructure is not only having revenue, but having consistent revenue. When you're making literally $1 million decisions and trying to plan for the future, you need to know you can't make a 1-year plan. You really need a 10-year plan. That's a issue at the national level in the United States, and it trickles all the way down to the local level. Is that it's hard to have long-term plans when you don't know what your long-term funding levels are going to be. So obviously, we all know that we have streets that are in rough shape. All right, so one of the things I'm going to jump right into is what's called the deterioration curve. So a street, I want everybody to think of a street like your car's engine, and that your engine takes certain preventative maintenance things that need to happen over the lifespan of that engine to make sure you get the maximum amount of life in it. You change the oil, you have belts that are replaced at certain intervals, your spark plugs, those sorts of things. A road is the same way. You just can't pave a street and then just, forget it, but we'll see you in 50 years. It just doesn't work that way. So when it comes to, like with an automobile engine, dollars spent early on can save you thousands of dollars on the back end. If you never change your vehicle's oil, you're going to end up replacing your entire engine. So engineers over the years have kind of put together what they call these deterioration curves here. And let me see if I can figure out how to work the laser pointer here. Oh, there we go. So I don't know if anybody can see this because it's behind you. But anywho, as you can see, what we have here is the condition of the street on the vertical axis right here. And then over time, you see on the x-axis, you have time. So, you know, the condition of the street starts off in good shape, and then over time it continues to deteriorate. So a street loses 70% of its 70% of its life, generally speaking, is it within the first 15 years. All right, so the key is once you get, it's kind of like this point in no return. Once you hit this threshold here, it's going to start deteriorating very rapidly and gets expensive really quick. So what the engineers have put together is $4 spent in this neck of the woods can save you $45 to $75. By the time you hit this point, you're in some sort of reconstruction phase right here. So ideally what we want to do in a perfect scenario is you're applying the right maintenance technique at the right time, right in this sweet spot right here. And what you do, you're improving the quality of your street. It'll slowly deteriorate, and you can extend that lifespan. So this is an area, you know, we try to do our best on, but unfortunately due to funding levels, it's very hard to do. So back in 2013, we had an engineering firm come in. They did what's called a pavement condition index. Where basically, they have these metrics where they rank your infrastructure, or the street based on, you know, various conditions, and they crunch all that data and they kick it out. So you have a very good street. We know what that looks like. Good, fair. So street with a score of 95 is what we would call very good. It's pretty much brand new. 70 is still pretty good, and then fair, you can kind of see you're starting to see some cracking there. Poor, and then, you know, a gravel road would be 0. So let's take a snapshot here of Rock Island. So the average PCI, now keep in mind this was 2014. So our average score in 2014 was a 62. Okay, so 41% of our streets were in good to excellent condition, 43% were fair to good, and 16% were in failed to poor condition. So the good news is about 80% of our streets are in some condition where some sort of maintenance is still applicable. The bad news is it's not going to stay that way, and it's going to deteriorate really quickly. So where I have this red box here is where we want to catch, you know, where your dollars are best spent, right? Once you hit that point of no return, it gets very expensive very quick, all right? So one of the reasons why we're up here tonight is to say, hey, you know, we need to start playing today, because to continue to kick this can down the road is only going to bite us on the back end. All right, so at the time of the study, Rock Island needed $7.2 million a year over 20 years to maintain an average score of 62. You could drop that down to $5.4 million if we want to have an average score of 55. We've been averaging about $1 million per year in proactive street maintenance, another $2 to $3 million in reconstructions and grants, and so essentially we've been short $3 million since 2013. $3 million a year since 2013. So I'm going to run through some of our current funding sources for infrastructure. Again, if I'm going too fast, feel free to have me slow down or elaborate. But I think most everyone up here is probably familiar with things. I think it's always important to, you know, like the elephant in the room, we're talking about raising revenue here. Another way to say that is taxes, right? So taxes, fees, however you want to slice it. One of the things the first words out of their mouth are, you talk to someone, what do I pay all these taxes for? You know, and you know, the unfortunate reality is almost nothing from your property taxes goes towards streets. It's completely funded through local gas tax and state motor fuel tax and grants and state and federal grants. So let's dive into that a little bit. So we get the state of Illinois has a gas tax. They collect that, distribute it to all the municipalities in Illinois based on their population. So we receive about $1.6 million from the state of Illinois. So if it wasn't for that funding that we're getting from the state of Illinois, we would be in a really bad spot. Approximately 800,000 of that is contributed to our capital improvement fund, which is when I say capital improvement, that's like street reconstruction. So it's completely ripped out and redone. Another 800,000 is put towards what we call our actual maintenance contracts. That would be like asphalt, and we'll go into cover those a little bit later, but that's your asphalt mill and fill, concrete patching, crack sealing, things of that nature. Gaming funds. At one point, we received gaming funds. That is not the case currently. State and federal grants, this can vary wildly. This is one of the challenges. You know, you put our engineering department, they submit us for grants. You know, you can get that big grant one year, and then you can be nothing the next year. So again, although this, and oftentimes there's a local match that has to go with that, right? So if you can only match X amount of dollars, the challenge is you can only get so much done for that. So the fact that we don't have local revenue to match federal and state revenue also hurts us. That's why you see Moline, when they do these great big projects, they're brand new concrete ripping. I'm sure everybody remembers 23rd Avenue when they did all that. You know, and then you see like Rock Island, where we're doing an asphalt overlay over like 18th Avenue or 38th Street. You know, a lot of that has to do with what kind of local match can we come up with, and asphalt is cheaper than concrete. So. General fund, that's our revenue through property taxes. We do have general fund revenue that gets applied towards streets, but that's what the levels of the services that a municipality, that's your snow removal, that's your payroll, that's your materials for pothole patching, that's that sort of thing. So this although it is maintenance, your snow removal isn't really something that's extending the lifespan of your streets. All right, so local gas tax, and I don't know how well everyone can see this, but traditionally we were at 1 cent per gallon, and you can see back in 2015 we were generating about $200,000, all right? As time has gone on, now we're creeping up to about $300,000, where you think, oh, well, this is great, we're trending in the right direction. Well, if you notice, back in 2019, we actually increased, well, I'm sorry, let me backpedal here. In 2017, we went to 2 cents, 2018, 3 cents, and then in 19, we went to 5, and we've held at 5 cents per gallon ever since. So although we're seeing more revenue, we've also significantly increased our rate. And as you can see here, this revenue is actually continuing to decline. Well, why is that? Well, one, we're competing against Iowa, obviously. Cars are getting better fuel efficiency. You're starting to see more electric vehicles on the road. This isn't a challenge unique to Rock Island. This is something the federal government's going to have to deal with. This is something the state government is going to have to deal with. So it's not unique. The long-term trajectory of this is downwards, and $300,000 isn't nowhere near enough what our infrastructure needs. So that's kind of a snapshot of our local gas tax. I will add that and I believe actually Alderman Parker kind of spearheaded this, but back in 2019, prior to 2019, these funds weren't even lockboxed into infrastructure. I think they kind of went into the general fund pool. So even though we were capturing all this revenue, it wasn't even guaranteed going towards streets. All right, so just to kind of recap here, our current funding sources are predominantly that state motor fuel tax that's collected by the state of Illinois and then distributed back down to us, and then about about shy of 300,000 in local gas tax. So why is this important? We've talked about the curve and you know, properly maintaining your infrastructure, but why is infrastructure even important in the first place, all right? So the American Society of Civil Engineers estimated in its failure to act report that America's kicking the can on infrastructure has a hidden cost of $3,400 per family in the United States, right? So although sometimes it's hard to see the tangible results of that, although I can make a case you probably could. There's all sorts of hidden costs when you let your roads deteriorate. You get worse fuel economy. You have more wear and tear on your vehicle. It has a economic impact for business. It has an economic impact for families. So, this isn't a unique problem to Rock Island. This is a United States-wide problem. So here's just kind of some data here if you want to review it. But basically, a lot of individuals got together and ran the numbers, and $3,400 is the hidden cost that, having deteriorating infrastructure is costing American families every year. Another important part of this, and this is especially important to a community like Rock Island, that its primary revenue source is property taxes. When you have a street that has, when you have a house with a deteriorated or failed street in front of it, that house does not have its maximum property value. So every time that house changes hands and sells, it's selling for just that much less than what it could potentially sell for with sufficient infrastructure in front of it. I mean, that's just, it's a subliminal reality that, realtors joke, they say, well, whenever you're showing a house, you always drive to it on the nicest streets on the way in. So this puts an even heavier burden on low-income folks who are counting on, the reality is, in the United States of America, private property is a fundamental part of the way our system is set up. Our tax code rewards that. Our local governments are funded through it. And when you depreciate the value of private property, you're in fact shooting yourself in the foot if your primary revenue stream is property taxes. And your low-income folks disproportionately share that burden because, one, they're the ones that least likely have the resources to move someplace else. And, when grandma, rest her soul, passes away and leaves the house to the kids, it's worth less than what it could have been worth. So it's robbing people of intergenerational wealth. So what's the solution here? Well, you just got to start fixing stuff. You got to close the infrastructure investment gap. And what we're going to recommend here tonight is creating a fee for that. So what does that fee look like? All right, so Mike and I have been thinking about this for years. But if we were ever up here in front of the city council, what would we propose? What could we come up with to try and solve this issue? So what we have here is we'd like to levy, or we're recommending levying an infrastructure investment fee on all parcels in the city of Rock Island, very similar to the way stormwater is structured. Rock Island has about 16,000 parcels. The fee would be progressive based on the parcel size. Extra large, large, medium, and small. Estimated revenue would be $2 million. And we're also recommending the elimination of the local gas tax to give Rock Island residents and businesses a break. Here's the thing about local gas tax. Unfortunately, it's just a long-term downward trajectory is down. So does it make sense, at least maybe you can give your residents and your businesses a bit of a kickback and incentive to fuel up at the pump, and maybe somebody's in town, you're 5 cents cheaper than your neighbors, they might fill up and go into that gas station, grab a coffee or a candy bar or what have you. So we just don't see, to get, in 5 years, they'll probably be collecting less than $200,000 on the local gas tax. Does it continue to make sense to nickel and dime your residents there? Probably not. Also, I want to have the caveat here, everything you're going to see is very preliminary. Obviously, if we were to move forward with something like this, we'd get involved with the finance department and really get into the weeds on, for an example, any property that's in some sort of foreclosure status or tax auction or whatever is not going to be paying this, right? So there's a question of what, in a perfect world, what would it generate, and then what are you realistically going to capture? And those are some of the things we'll have to get into the weeds on a little bit if we decide to move forward. So here's how it's going to be broken out. Essentially, I threw some sizes up here just to kind of give everybody kind of some perspective. So El Patron, the restaurant, that parcel that business sits on would be considered a small parcel, right? This is in square feet. The parcel that City Hall sits on, so we all know kind of the size of City Hall, that would be considered a medium parcel. So as you can see, you're getting a fairly large parcel. City Hall's pretty sizable parcel, and you're still only considered medium. Large, that would be our neighbors, Royal neighbors across the street. That parcel right there would be an example of a large parcel, and an extra large parcel would be anything bigger than Royal neighbors, essentially anything bigger than an acre, right? So if you have an acre in the city limits of Rock Island, you have a very sizable parcel. So what does that look like, all right? So a small parcel would pay $6.67 a month. That's $20 a quarter, $80 a year. Medium, $10, $30, $120. Large, $18.55, $220. Extra large, $25.75, $300. So even if you're, actually I think the biggest parcel in Rock Island is actually Highland Springs Golf Course, but let's say, poor John Grip. But so, is he in here? Yes. Oh, there you go. So, sorry, John. Okay. We're just going to siphon money from the Parks Department to fix the streets, right? But in a progressive, there's all kinds of theories on taxation. In a truly progressive taxation, you would like to see. Well, let me just point out here. So here's the number of parcels in each one of these sizes. The percent of the overall parcels that each size makes up. So 84% of all parcels in Rock Island are either small or medium. And so the small parcels generate, even though they make up 34% of the overall number of parcels in the city, they're only paying 21% of the revenue. The medium-sized parcels are going to be, make up about 50%, and they're 47. So as you can see, you're really balanced here. And then with a progressive system, you would like to see these numbers larger, which is the case. So 8% of the parcels are going to make up 14% of all the revenue, and the extra large parcels, even though they're only 7% of the revenue, John Grip is going to pay 16% of this fee. So that's kind of the breakdown of the revenue. Again, the caveat being that is all very preliminary, and there may be some plus or minus or some things we need to tweak there if council decides that that's the direction we want to go. All right, so what are the residents of Rock Island going to get from this? So one of the things, and we've all experienced this, you pay all these taxes. Every time you turn around, you're paying another tax. The tax man's just after you, and where does your money go? Everyone's like, I pay all these taxes, and where does it go? If I had a nickel every time I heard somebody tell me that on the phone. This will be the first time in the history probably of the city of Rock Island that you can literally point to where your tax dollars are going to go. Okay, that is one of the, I've been in this role, Mike, you've been here 10 years now, I've been here 9. I can tell you, if you spend $2 million a year on your streets in the city of Rock Island, you will not recognize Rock Island in 5 years. You look at 18. So for an example, 17th Avenue, directly behind Walgreens, CVS, 30th Street to 24th Street. We resurfaced that last year. It was $100,000. If you drive on that street, you can't believe you're in Rock Island. Imagine doing 20 of those. 5 years, you're going to be blown away. So the proof is just in the pudding. All right. So if anybody wants more details on these different maintenance techniques and all these things, I'm happy to. I'm not going to get into these weeds here right now for the sake of time, but we'll just go through some photos here. Crack sealing. It's important to keep water on top of roads and not underneath it. That's the short answer. All right. 24th Street, we did that this year. But seal coat. Here's 35th Street West. Grip's gonna be paying all this extra money. We gotta get people to Highland Springs without hitting potholes. So there's before, there's after. Asphalt mill and fill. So this is 17th Avenue. This gives you a lot of bang for your buck. Mill up the old surface. This is the old Hawthorne Irving Primary Academy, 14th Street there. The street was a complete disaster. I think this one was 2 years old. Photos don't do it justice. 17th Avenue, right behind Dunkin' Donuts. And then concrete patching. Here's Black Hawk Hills, the notorious Black Hawk Hills, by far the worst, probably the worst street I've ever seen in Rock Island. So when someone says, well, what will this fee go to? That's what it's going to go to. And when you look at these homes along here, imagine trying to sell your house on that street. And you think to yourself, would I pay another $80 a year to have my street look like that? I mean, where can I write the check? But in fairness, though, it's this is a tough decision for council to make. I'm blessed. The city of Rock Island pays me well, and there are going to be folks that will be a lot of money for them. So we also need to be realistic about that. Longview Park, John, we can't charge him all that money without taking care of him. So. Oh, one of my favorites, Old 12th Avenue. So our guys shout out to our guys. Our guys actually did this one ourselves, right at the base of Hallberg there. Boom. Like you're in Bettendorf. Alderman Parker here, this one, sorry.
But Bettendorf doesn't have Hallberg. They don't have.
That's true. And Bettendorf is going to get burnt with their infrastructure, I can tell you that much. They will be having this conversation
You're
in
telling
40
me
years.
vinyl facade and plastic everything is not a sustainable
Right,
solution?
yeah, exactly. So 40 years from now, when Bettendorf superintendent's having this conversation over there, we can all look back at this and laugh, So 8th Avenue, right here, brick patching, before, after, and just 23rd Street, another. I mean, his photos speak for themselves. So what you're seeing here is, what would you say, Mike, like $500,000? $1 million to $500,000 over the course of everything here is probably within the last 3 years. So, selection, everybody wants to know, well, whose street's going to get picked? Another thing, if I had a nickel, everybody says, oh, I bet the Mayor's Street doesn't look like this. I'm like, well, I'd encourage you to drive up there. Yeah. But, so it's complicated. There's a lot of the driving force behind this is going to be the pavement condition index, trying to find those streets in the sweet spot. But ultimately, there's no substitute for just going out there, getting eyes on it, and seeing what technique is best. Yep.
I just have a question related to the street index, because your study was done 10 years ago.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So everything's worse.
And 10 more years of the streets getting worse. So do you is that something our own staff can update that data, or do we have to?
We will update as we fix things. We will update the data. However, you can assume everything is worse.
Right.
Everything that hasn't been fixed is worse.
You'll use that old data as one of the variables.
Correct. Yes.
How was the data compiled?
Well, it's pretty. They have engineers go out and they do a lot of they basically drive every street with a truck, and they scan it, and then they do core drills. And Rock Island's very unique because you have a lot of weird scenarios where you have a brick street with an asphalt overlay. So it was actually very challenging. I remember we spent a lot of money on that, right, Mike? Mike had intimate knowledge of that.
Well, not really. It actually happened before I came here. It happened in 2013. I came at the end of 2013, but it was several millions of dollars for that pavement condition survey that was done. It takes specialized equipment. They take the street, they break it up in segments, then they inspect that segment. It's usually about a 40-foot long, completely section of the street. Curb to curb, 40 feet long. They'll do a survey of that, and they'll break it down to whatever length that segment is. So it may be 3 or 4 sections or segments for one block section. And then they evaluate and give a scoring from that. Like Luke said, as as the streets are improved or resurfaced or reconstructed, we would update that data. But we don't have the means or the equipment to keep surveying the streets over and over year after year, or even 10 years at a time, or the funding to do that. So it was nice to get this initial data influx and be able to use that data to present for information like tonight, but going back and having another one done would take some capital planning. So
Question for you, though, if I may. So what's the cost-benefit assessment there with regard to asphalt versus concrete? I mean, the asphalt clearly is not going to last as long.
yeah, one thing that's nice with asphalt is you can come in and you can mill it back out and put it back down. I mean, that's really, it's a little bit cheaper, although it's not becoming as cheap as it used to be compared to concrete. Concrete pavement has about a 50-year pavement life. In the instance that we're talking about here tonight, most of what we would be proposing or doing would be a lot more of the mill and fill type of product. Now, granted, on a concrete street, we would be looking at shorter sections, more of a pavement patching rather than a total reconstruct. This type of funding of $2 million, you would never be able to just come in and do reconstructs everywhere in the city. We wouldn't get anywhere.
So have you, and maybe this is a silly question, but have you looked at what it would cost, let's say, for a one city block, 24 feet wide, 50 years for concrete? How much money would you pay over that same 50 years with a mill and fill?
Yeah, and when I first started tonight, I did a presentation in 2019, and I had per block cost in that based off of the pavement type. And I want to say, gosh, I should have brought that survey with me or that presentation with me, but it was around $500,000 per block. So.
And to answer your question, what you're hitting on is kind of
The mic here.
industry that, asphalt people love asphalt, concrete people love concrete. So you're hitting on the industry argument, right? There's some engineers that favor asphalt. There's other engineers that favor concrete. Asphalt takes more maintenance. Concrete is more of a set it and forget it, but when it goes south, it starts going south really quick. So it's kind of there's not necessarily a one size fits all. It all kind of varies in what kind of subgrade you're working with as well. So the short answer is you're kind of hitting on the industry dilemma, I guess you could say.
Asphalt's built a little bit like a commodity because the oil in it depends on oil prices. And so, that can vary dramatically from year to year. And
Right, and those different intervals that you're going to have to perform maintenance on, like when you put concrete down, the interval at which you crack seal is going to be different than when you put down an asphalt street. So like you put down an asphalt street, ideally you want to let those cracks reflect up within the first, 2 to 3 years and then get in there and crack seal, whereas a concrete street, that might be 10 years. So it varies.
if you have a concrete road and you're patching some asphalt in there, a lot of time I've seen before we've used asphalt and patch it versus concrete. Is that correct or not?
In a more pothole patching
Right.
setting, yes, that is correct.
If you have a pothole where there's asphalt and you put asphalt in there, does that hold up better than the asphalt patch pothole filling with concrete?
You generally do not patch a pothole with concrete, but you may cut out a strip of the street itself and patch it with concrete.
We're filling potholes with asphalt. Whether
Correct.
it's a concrete street or whether it's an asphalt street,
Oh,
correct?
generally it bonds to an asphalt street better because you're putting it in when it's hot,
Yeah.
and then those chemicals create a bonding effect. So you generally get better bonding asphalt to asphalt. Yes.
So like on 20 and a half Avenue, from 23rd Street to, let's say, 22nd Street, most of that street is good, except for where that dip is, and that's where all the potholes are. So like, would you just do like the section, because you're always coming out to redo those potholes.
Like that, you could cut it out and tie rebar in and pour it all the way back up as concrete, or you could also bring it would depend on the situation, or you could bring in a milling machine, mill that down, and then repave that section as well.
So what is it that you put on 25th, is it 25th Street? Going north of 18th Avenue. It's not, there were a lot of,
Oh, that was that asphalt sealer. Is that what you're referring to?
yeah, it's the brown stuff. the light brown stuff.
Did
I
they-
don't know.
And then,
Did they
yeah.
did they put the gravel over the top of it for a while?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the asphalt rejuvenator. It stores the elasticity in the asphalt, so it doesn't. Asphalt works best when it's not dry, or it needs to be flexible to flex with the heave and haw, the freeze-thaw cycles. So that rejuvenates that.
It hasn't been that long, but it seems to be holding better than some of the potholes where you just are constantly patching them.
It works well, yeah. So
Okay.
Well, I have a quick question then. Okay, so say we fund this 2 million, but what changes? What changes with the maintenance schedule? What changes? Because we don't have the data or the ability to go out and do these cores and actually do this data that we had in 2013. We don't have that ability. So what changes so that we don't go back into the same situation? You have the funding, but if we don't have the maintenance schedule in place, or I guess that's the question what I'm asking. What's the maintenance plan so we don't go back to this again if we do fund this?
sure. So the concern is that you would have this funding, and then you're asking what we would do differently than what we're already
Because
doing.
right now you're waiting on, residents to complain or data from somewhere. I mean, there's a gap in there somewhere.
Well, you would use that, so that data is still valid that we got in 2014. We just know that it's in worse condition than it really was then. So you would build off that, and then right now we know what needs to be done. The issue is we don't actually have the funding to implement. Like when you like 17th Avenue that we just did behind Walgreens, right? So in about 2 years, you should crack seal that once all those cracks underneath reflect into the asphalt, right? So the challenge we run into now is we don't have the funding to do that everywhere we do work, or apply the proper maintenance technique on the right street at the right time.
So that's some of the question I guess I'm asking. We get the funding to try to fix the streets, but by the time we fix the streets that are bad, we're back at the same boat with the streets we already fixed, right?
No, you would have extended essentially what you're saying is what we're trying to prevent.
Right.
Is to keep them on that curve from them falling off that cliff right now, because right now you're teetering on that edge of that cliff right here, and we want to catch it and move it back this way. If you don't act, you're going to hit that point of no return where that the engine in that automobile's blowing up.
So with that 2 million, that's what us doing it in-house, or we're contracting this out?
Well, some of the work would be contracted out. So,
But we really don't know if that 2 million is gonna cover what we really need, because that can influx with the contracts or whatever, right?
well, we have I mean, Mike can jump. Well, we have a pretty good idea of what certain things are going to cost. Like that section behind CVS and Dunkin' Donuts, all that was about $100,000. So you're gonna put a cost inflationary cost on that, but
I guess as residents, that they're gonna need a hard sell to be able to prove to them that if I'm paying you more money, I'm not gonna have to worry about my streets looking the way they are now. And that's the problem. How do you reassure someone to get their, have them pay more money for something?
Yeah, and I agree. That's why when Luke mentioned a 10-year plan, our plan, if the council is generally in favor of this, is to bring back a 10-year plan, having a map showing this PCI data, a lot of the projects that we hope to do within that 10-year plan. As you mentioned, there is a cycle.
Right.
So, and there'll always be, I don't want to call it a vicious cycle, but it's a cycle that we're always going to have to be maintaining streets. You're going to resurface, you're going to have to crack seal, you're going to have to do asphalt rejuvenator over top of those new resurfacings. You're going to have to do crack sealing for concrete pavement. But again, we hope to bring back a 10-year plan with a overall, and we're already working on that plan now, and based off the PCI data, to be very transparent on where these repairs will happen.
I just don't want to be devil's advocate, but I know when I was younger, I remember the maintenance on the streets. And eventually something happened where that had to change, where those fundings were reallocated somewhere else. So how do we, and I'm speaking in the mind of a resident, because these are the questions that we're going to receive if we go to the residents with this. What is going to guarantee that that's not going to change, where we do it for the first 5 or 10 years and then we come into a pitch with the money and then now it has to reallocate to somewhere else? How can we?
So you would structure your ordinance to say it can only be spent on these services. So that would be one you know, but ultimately, you know, if you had a city council up here that say, hey, we want to use this money for something else, I mean, you know, there's only.
Because that's why we're in this situation now.
Well, exactly.
But we did the gas tax, we did called a lockbox.
Right.
And now obviously that ordinance can be changed, but that's what the ordinance says, and so at least it sets the direction until the council feels strong enough they want to change it. The other is there are going to be streets and areas that you're gonna pay into this tax, who knows, 10, 12, 15 years, and not see your street done.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's gonna happen.
There's also many people that have just had their streets completed in the last
It'd be a
5,
long
10
time
years.
before they,
That,
30 years they could be paying and not see a thing.
But with this kind of money, I don't think anybody will not drive on a street that's been fixed, right? Like, you're not gonna fix my street, but I drive on 20th Street every day.
and we're, I think,
You're gonna have is that we're putting money into projects that they're not seeing an investment, I mean, a return from. But you want me to pay more for something that should be being done anyway.
Yep,
I
I
mean,
agree.
Again, I'm speaking as a resident.
That's right.
That's gonna be a hard sell.
You're
We're
paying
putting
into something
money
that
into
should be done
projects that
anyway.
we're not getting a return from, but you want me to pay more for something that should be done anyway.
yep, I agree.
But we just don't have
It's
the
a
money
hard-
to be the should done.
I get that.
And
It
so-
makes sense for us, but
Yeah.
We're all talking here too, thinking more residential, the street in front of my home, but these dollars will also be spent on the main streets that everyone drives, not just specifically for your residential home. So like 17th Street from north of 18th Avenue, it's in terrible shape. That would be one of the first ones that we go and do a mill and fill and resurface that area. So everybody will or should see the benefit, whether it's in front of your home or on a main street.
I would have loved to have this at our unplug, because then we could have gotten some real good data from the people who were there. Because streets came up. You remember, I mean, you were getting hit
Always
with,
comes up.
with questions with the
Always
street.
comes
So, I
up.
mean, I think that would have been an excellent time to kind of fish this out a little bit, to kind of get a census of how they will feel.
In several,
Just on the streets.
There you go.
One thing we're preparing to do is a community survey. That'll come back to you shortly, and there will be an opportunity to put some questions on the community survey related to
Well,
roads.
okay, but, so we had an ARPA survey. Half the comments were about streets, even though we couldn't use ARPA money for the streets, you know? And I think part and parcel, going along with what Alderman Robinson says, we have to do a better job of educating residents about their property taxes and what it goes to pay for, and that it's only 25%. You know, they think it's all City of Rock Island. We have to educate them, because the majority of them have no clue what those tax bills mean. And yes, we should be funding street maintenance anyways, but we don't have the money. But I, for one, am glad to finally see at least a proposal to start tackling this problem, because ignoring it just keeps making the problem get worse, and we're kicking the can down the road.
in
I
this,
think I'm against it. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
help
no.
you with the sale.
Understand.
Because it's gonna have to be a sale.
we've already talked about this.
And I can tell you, like, early 2010, 11, 12, somewhere around there, they did my street, but we were assessed $10,000. And we had 10 years to pay that. So it was $1,000 a year. So, I mean, I would imagine my lot price falls somewhere between a medium and a small. I mean, for the $1,000 I had to pay a year, paying $120 extra, that's 83 years to equal that same amount that I had to pay. So I understand that people are gonna be kind of frustrated that it's extra money. However, like you said, I pull out of my street, no matter which way I go, I hit really bad roads. So, I mean, to pay this, to have all the roads in town within 5 to 10 years be brought up, I think.
Luke
I
said
think
5,
that's-
let's go with 10.
10, okay. I mean, I think that's important. I mean, I think that adds value to the residents. And I know that, you know, $120 or $80 a year for some people is gonna be a lot. But, you know, I mean, I buy my gas in Rock Island, so I'm gonna see a cost savings when that gas tax goes away. I'm one of the few people that doesn't go to Iowa to buy that. But I think that the other thing people need to understand is we used to assess
Yes.
for your road. And for anybody that's had their road done, you can't complain because you didn't pay a dime for it.
Right.
So, I mean,
I think
there's that.
there's a few more questions here.
One last thing, and
Yeah.
I'll be done. Does this include alleys?
It can include alleys, yes.
I don't think alleys are the highest priority. We
I'm not
have
saying that.
20th Street and 17th Street that badly need.
I'm speaking as a resident.
But there are, because there are some alleys that are very critical, though, right?
I know, like,
Yeah.
we have a lot of gravel alleys, right? There's no secret to that. Gravel is shown as a 0 rating for PCI. So we do need to upgrade some of those alleys. We have to constantly grade those alleys year to year, and so there's maintenance associated with that. So the more we can improve those alleys, the better. So with that will be part of this rollout.
The reality with Rock
Here we go.
you have a city that was built for 54,000 people. It had 2 factories at International Harvester and at Case IH. Collectively, they employed 15,000 union, high-paying jobs. Now you're trying to maintain that infrastructure on 35,000 residents, if we're lucky, and no industrial base. So the reality is, rainbows and butterflies don't fix streets. So you're really, that is the reality of this situation. So you're kind of in a spot where, you can try and do something about it and invest in your infrastructure, or, it's going to continue to go the direction we've been talking about tonight.
And part of the challenge is motor fuel tax is going down, gas tax is going down, so in order to fund your road improvements, you gotta change your strategy on how you collect your revenue, and this is one way to do it.
Right, real quick.
I will yield to the floor because we have another presentation.
Yeah, I know.
We'll discuss this another time.
That's my reelection campaign. No more rainbows and butterflies.
Told Luke to
Solutions.
be good.
Yeah, he is good. I got to real quick and explain philosophy, not that I agree with one versus the other, but with the stormwater runoff, the small, medium, and large logically made sense because there was that much rain and soaking in or hard pervious material, where this is a little different because people drive on all the streets equally. So what's the philosophy or thoughts behind doing this by small, medium, large versus one price for everyone?
More frontage space. You have, in theory, right? You could have a parcel that kind of is triangular, but generally speaking, if you have a larger parcel, you're going to have more linear feet touching a road, if that makes sense.
Cul-de-sacs, they ended up.
Right,
with a lot,
yeah, exactly,
We
yeah.
looked at lots of different options for this, and this is the best option that we recommend. We looked at a flat fee for everyone, but bringing in the revenue that's needed based off the data is just, it wouldn't work.
And apartment complexes, 4-plex, 8-plex, whatever it is, how do you view that whole property and let that property owner divide how they
parcel.
divide it out?
And this has been, through the budget process in the last 4 to 5 years that I've been involved with budgeting, we've had revenue generating ideas. This has been a revenue generating idea. It's been discussed previously, but it's just never been to this point. And so I'm happy to see that it's here. This can be modified. We are needing $2 million per what the pavement condition is from 2013, but could we lower that? Yes, we could. But if you're going to do it, we should probably do it right.
I assume no other, at this point in this region, there's nobody else doing this.
Not in the immediate Quad Cities, no, but there's lots of examples from other areas, and a lot of our data came from some of those examples.
It's very popular on the West Coast.
If you have more questions about this, we can bump the
gotta get
burn
going.
till next week. If you want to continue talking about this, it's not a problem.
Todd, what was your time frame though, for implementing this? Like, in the next budget year, the year after?
Yeah, I mean, it could be put into place quicker than the next budget year. It's up to the council's.
I think we
Thumbs
should
up from me.
schedule, me too, schedule another unplugged, just talk about streets.
Yeah, so the next thing that we would be looking to do is bring back an ordinance and then some specific details related to what we're planning. I mean, this is very high level, right? But we would be coming back with another presentation probably after the first of the year with some more specific information for you to review.
And we have that.
Here you go.
We have all these CPI data in a ArcGIS online that we fully intend to share with everyone. So you can they're all color coded. Our GIS team put that all together. So you can kind of click on streets and see what they are. And then the goal here to kind of hit on what you were mentioning, Alderman Robinson, was that 5-10 year plan would be implemented into that GIS data where residents could kind of see where their street was at in the queue. Now, nothing says that, you know, it's going to stay, it's kind of a dynamic thing, but at least it would give people kind of an idea of where they could anticipate seeing something done in front of their house.
Okay. We're going to have to cut you off for another presentation. Thank you. All right.
I'll follow up.
3 minutes.
I yielded my floor, my portion, and somebody else took it.
Shouldn't have given it up.
I'll learn next time.
Get it in there, Mark.
All right.
All right, we
Chief.
ready? I have about 50 minutes,
Yeah. 15, not 50.
maybe about 7, so we'll keep
You
it
can do
nice
it. I
and
believe in
short.
you. Time is everything in your line of business.
Exactly. So we were kind of asked to look over the open burning and the recreational fire ordinances, and after taking a look, it had been almost 15 years since we had originally drafted these ordinances, and so it was a good time to make some changes out there for us. So the purpose, pretty clearly, the International Fire Code comes out every 3 years. It had been 15 years, so a couple different codes had been adopted and gone on. We hadn't updated these ordinances. We also recognized we needed a more clear authority on how to take care of some burning that was out there and how we were going to make sure that we didn't have nuisance fires that were disturbing neighboring properties. We also thought it would be pretty nice, especially after the derechos and the tornado that we had, that we could make sure that we put a burn ban in effect. Actually, after the tornado, we were lucky enough that the citizens just were putting everything on the curb. But if, you know, there was a delay and people wanted to start burning at that time, we could effectively just totally burn banning at that time and allow Public Works to get caught up if there was a longer-term cleanup at that point in time, or just weather conditions in general. We did go ahead and we took a look at our neighboring agencies and of course some different comparable communities throughout the state, and we got some pretty good ideas to implement for us. So with that, when we took a look at this, we just wanted to make sure that we were up to the current code with everything. What we also found out is that with some of the enforcement we were doing, we weren't really spelling out what we were trying to accomplish with that. So like with some of the recreational fires, we want them at 25 feet from any permanent structure. Unless it's a portable outdoor burn pit, then we go to 15. We wanted to spell that out with some of the International Fire Code and make sure that we were spelling this out for citizens so that they knew how to enforce this. One of the simplest ones was just the means of extinguishment being present, just so that they can take care of anything that started to get a little bit out of hand. Some of the existing language that we have out there is the use of a air curtain burner device. I had to look it up myself. I didn't even know what it was. So it looks like a cargo container with a big fan on it, burns it real hot so it burns cleaner. It's just not something that's used a lot, even in the Midwest. So we're like, let's just kind of move on to what the current standards are. It mentioned state regulations, but it didn't take into consideration the EPA and some of their permitting that was involved with it. So with the open burning, this is going to be like your prairie grass and some of the clearing of lots. It's actually what Parks does every year. So Parks every year is filling out the EPA permit. They're turning it into the fire marshal. We're making sure that the conditions are conducive to go ahead and do that open burning, and it gives the fire marshal the right to go ahead and ban that if those conditions aren't met. So when you look at the new section, really what we're doing is we're establishing a time frame and age of responsibility. So if we were saying an attended fire, you know, is that a 13-year-old or an 18-year-old? We're going to ask for 18. You know, fire's relatively dangerous. We'd prefer to have an adult take responsibility for that. Also for the burning, so that we're just not burning 24/7. The hours for a recreational burning would be from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. in the evening. So that was pretty consistent that we saw with our neighboring communities out there. It also, again, gives the Office of the Fire Chief the ability to burn based upon the conditions out there, especially in drought conditions. It also gives us, anytime, one of the biggest concerns that we constantly run into is those unintentional nuisance hazards that are out there. So whether the wind is so high that it's blowing smoke into neighboring homes, it's accelerating the fire growth, anything that we consider to be a nuisance, it gives us the ability to go in and be able to order the extinguishment of that fire so that we don't create more hazards within the community. And then establishes approved materials for burning. So it was kind of what we went off of. We're not going to want leaves, the cleanup from fall or the spring, but it's going to be your chopped wood. It's going to be actual firewood, 1 inch in diameter or larger, and we go ahead and we spell that out a little bit clearer for everyone. Then we added a section because we were much more defined on that if there was a violation to those recreational fires, that there would be a penalty assessed with that, and that's $75. Short and sweet.
So are these gonna all go through municipalities then, the fines and what have you?
Yeah, so what we do after we write that ordinance violation, we just take it to the police department and it's processed at that time.
What are you considering an extinguisher? Like an actual fire extinguisher or a hose or?
Bucket of water, fire hose,
The fine, $75. Would it be a progressive if you were called more than once? Should it be progressive or not?
for that one, this one I believe is the 75, so what'll happen with, the one that we have more of an issue with is the leaf burning in the fall and the spring, and those are progressive.
So when you say, okay, they write a ticket, and then PD just processes the ticket, that's not the same thing as going through municipalities. It should be something simple, like, right?
PD writes a ticket for an ordinance violation, it is submitted to municipalities, and then it's handled through municipalities.
Okay.
Like Cora and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
In all honesty, we write very few tickets.
How would this be enforced? Is this, if you guys see, if someone calls?
So the way that we've done this in the past and will continue to do it is based upon someone calling in and you know, concerned about what it is. The two biggest concerns that we have is that the recreational fire is generally close to some sort of structure, a wooden fence, a garage, especially when the garages are along an alley, they're only 4 or 5 feet apart. They're worried about it catching the garage on fire. The other is during, you know, the weather turns, the wind's picking up, they go to open up a window and the smoke is blowing directly into the wind. Those are the two biggest complaints that we get.
Okay.
And generally at that point in time, we just have a conversation with the recreational burner, and it's usually resolved relatively easy.
So Chief, you and I have dealt with this in a couple different situations where we've had neighbors or citizens come up and say, hey, my neighbor won't stop burning, and the smoke is coming over into my yard, and you know, my great grandfather is on he's on oxygen, and basically you guys have had your hands tied.
And that's
This will pretty much, or at least address that, and give you guys a little bit more authority to be proactive.
So the two that you'll see in there is that we do limit the time now so that it's not a 24/7 issue that we have seen in the past. And the other is once we determine that that is a nuisance to a neighbor or a potential hazard, that gives us the opportunity to ask for the extinguishment.
But even firewood can smoke a lot. You know, you get green wood or, you know, type situation, or if it doesn't go hot enough, it has a tendency to smoke more than not. So, and that, at this point, would still be legit as far as they're burning firewood and everything else, but they may be creating a lot of smoke.
This won't prohibit me from from using my smoker.
No.
Yeah.
Good.
That's that you don't do it in your garage. That's the biggest one we'd ask.
But
Yeah, I
still,
have
I
to take it
think
outside
that
my garage.
greenwood that's smoking can be determined to be a nuisance.
Right,
Can
If
it?
it is.
Is it?
yeah, if it's blowing into your
Yes,
window.
so, yeah, and it depends on the condition. You know, atmospheric
that's
conditions are gonna really dictate that. You know, after a big rain, if it was uncovered and now we're putting out, it's hanging low, it's blowing right into a neighbor's, we're probably gonna ask for extinguishment at that time.
Now, when people call in, do they so I have a big issue with this in one area of my ward. When people call in, they have to give their name and address to report the fire or not, because there's.
Do not.
Sadly, there's some fear of retaliation in certain neighborhoods that, yeah.
So twofold, we do ask that people call 911, which is kind of not exactly an emergent situation, but it does help the computer track which vehicles are in service. It helps with our CAD to get the right units out the door at the right time. So, you know, when they call into the dispatch center, they're going to be asked a lot of questions. Most of the time, people do not identify themselves. And then that is a big part of what we run into when we're out there, is that it is a neighborhood dispute at that point in time, and we just have to work our way through that.
So, have you ever had situations where, you know, one neighbor likes to burn a lot, and they're living next door to someone who's an asthmatic, or someone who has lung issues or whatever, and, you know, it forces them to either stay indoors, they can't open their windows or whatever? Have you ever had that, and how does that get worked through?
The evolution of burning in the city of Rock Island's been pretty dynamic in my time. So when I first started in '97, it was free burning of just about everything: leaves, sticks, recreational fires.
Garbage?
It was, yeah, it was pretty incredible. Then we went to a couple days a week, so people could elect to stay in or out, and it's just progressively gotten to where we're trying to create a comfortable environment for the citizens out there, and that's where we're gonna have to use that judgment based upon atmospheric conditions. A lot of times what we would consider a nuisance, you know, they don't particularly care for burning. It's burning clean, there's very little smoke. We're probably not gonna ask that, we'll probably ask them to say, you have to extinguish by 11 PM, as the ordinance would state, but everybody kind of has their difference of opinion on that.
You said the hours would be 7 AM to 11 PM?
PM.
You know, those early morning recreational burns.
Recreational something.
I like to wake up with a strong cup of coffee and a big fire.
11 PM may not, you know, once again, I can see some people, you know, on their yard, having family or friends over, being a little later than 11, but, I know I've done it
Me too.
after 11.
Don't tell anybody.
That's all, I mean, I agree, and it's gonna be a judgment call, because, once again, some people are saying, wait a minute, I'm burning wood, it's my yard, I'm 25 feet away or more, yes, it's creating some smoke, you know, just because they have that, why should I be hampered with this?
But if they have problems breathing, why should you be allowed to infringe upon?
And that's what I'm
their
saying, it's, I'm not saying they should, but
Right.
that's, the argument's been around for ages.
Same one we have about fireworks.
Well, and the weather app on my phone, it'll tell you every day what's the air quality, assigns some number, and, you know, in the summer especially, I mean, most of the time it's pretty bad air quality.
Why was the, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I had residents that were burning 24/7 for months just to irritate the neighbors. So, this is great.
In all
It is
honesty,
good.
I would say a majority of our calls are based upon that.
Why was 11 PM time chosen?
We looked at it so many different,
Firemen go
there
to
was,
sleep.
there was very few that went 24 hours for neighboring cities or comparable cities throughout the state that we researched. We wanted to be restrictive enough that, because most likely what has happened for the ones that we get called to at 2 AM is they've just allowed the fire to burn itself out, and it's unattended at that time. So we try to come up with a reasonable amount of time for enjoyment, but yet a responsible time for, you know, to have a clear air breathing quality for the evening.
And that would be my only concern also, because I mean, if I have family in town, to cut it off at 11,
Yeah, there's some that had 9 AM.
that's when the party
Hope you
starts.
got good neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing, I think it's all great. I think the 11 might be a little restrictive. I can see the 2, or so at midnight or something.
Restrictive
but-
enough.
Ask for
That's what
forgiveness than
I would
permission.
say 10.
Moses.
I was thinking,
I would think 10.
I think 10 is
I can't stay
plenty.
up much later than that, but my family may want to.
If you are an elderly person, or if you are somebody that has a breathing issue, the fact that you cannot open your windows when somebody's burning their fire is a real hindrance to you. But if it cuts off at 11 o'clock, you can open your windows so you can sleep without and at 7 o'clock, if they start burning again, you're gonna have to shut everything up. So, I mean, I think you need to give people at least an 8-hour reprieve from the smoke. That's just kinda only fair.
What about those who don't have that situation? Like,
Then you won't get a call. They're only gonna come out if somebody calls and complains. I mean, if your neighbors are all, well, if your neighbors are all fine with it, I doubt if they'll call.
Just invite them over.
I've had some questionable fires, and none of my neighbors ever call.
I'm
It's
gonna
fine.
be driving around at 1 o'clock in the morning and calling on everybody.
But
Low the hill.
unfortunately, more and more people have, or children, adults have asthma issues, or a lot of people have COPD and other lung issues. It's becoming more and more common.
And the number of calls that we've had for these has dramatically decreased over the years. So it has kind of reined itself in, but it really, all it kind of comes down to is it's going to be, you get one new neighbor, and that changes the dynamic of that neighborhood.
I think it's great.
I
You
think
should
this
have
is a
teeth
good
in it.
compromise.
Yep,
Good compromise.
absolutely.
Not gonna ever make everybody happy.
All right, any other questions, comments?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All those in